Hi, I'm Brian Lemons, and this is Perspective. Last night, Pierce Morgan had on his show Reverend Jesse Peterson. And if you did not get a chance to see the Pierce Morgan show on CNN last night, I have to show you this clip to uh, really just get you to go with me into the dialogue I want to have today with you all. Please bear with me with the time. I know there's a lot of things going on right now in Detroit, and I will cover those things with this bankruptcy, the Chapter 9 following, but I could not let this one go. So please take a moment and watch this clip. I'm sorry for the time, but
with you, Reverend Peterson, if I may. You said some pretty contentious things about all this. What is your view about the verdict?
Well, first, this case was not about race at all. And what happened, you have the race hustlers and poverty pimps like Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and others who turned it into a race issue in order to gain power and wealth. And you also had Barack Obama jumping into it by saying that if he had a son, he would look just like Trayvon Martin. And I thought that was insane for him to make that type of comment. He only did that because he wanted to incite the anger of black Americans and others. This case is about overturning stand your ground laws and also about more gun control law, getting more gun control law passed. And it's about Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, NAACP and others using black Americans by dividing the races, intimidating white people in order to gather more power or get more power and wealth.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, though. If for argument's sake, the Facebook billionaire owner, Mark Zuckerberg, who is famous for wearing hoodies, had he been walking exactly where Trayvon Martin was at 7 o'clock at night on a rainy, dark night, and George Zimmerman had seen him, do you think that he would have reacted exactly the same way? Got out of his car, pursued him, reported him, and then got into a struggle which ended up with him shooting him dead?
If the situation that happened with Trayvon and George had been the same, yes, it would have the same outcome. I imagine that the same outcome would have been the same. But the question
you really think George Zimmerman would have looked at a young white man in a hoodie and thought the same thing, that this guy is potential trouble?
Well, George Zimmerman would have done whatever it took to protect himself. It didn't matter to George Zimmerman the color of the man. And this notion that Trayvon Martin was some little innocent kid tiptoeing to the tulips and George Zimmerman had nothing else to do but to go out and kill him is a lie. It's an absolute lie. And I think that for the people to mislead, that are in control of this issue, to mislead America in that manner are very dishonest people. Trayvon Martin was a thug. His parents know that. You know that. I know that.
Don't
and
you
the
speak
folks
for me,
who sat
sir.
in on the
Don't you
jury
speak for me.
and heard that know that as well.
Don't put words into my mouth. There's very little evidence that Trayvon Martin was a thug. The only evidence we have of him ever being violent was in the altercation with George Zimmerman, a much older man who had got out of his car to follow him, ignored directions to follow him, and then got into an altercation. And if you listen to the parents, they'll tell you that Trayvon Martin was clearly, he felt in fear of his own safety. Where are his rights for self-defense?
Trayvon Martin was an example of what happens when these black boys and girls are raised in single parents household. And if Trayvon Martin was such a good little kid tiptoeing through the tulips, why did they work so hard to keep his history out of the courtroom during the trial? If he was a good guy, they would have been happy to present that evidence, but they kept it out because they knew that Trayvon Martin was a thug, and that's what it was all about. He was a pot smoking. He had been thrown out of school several times.
Are you saying that everyone
He
that
was even
smokes
found
pot,
to have
everyone that smokes
marijuana.
pot in America is a thug, are they?
Well, you know, there were pictures on his Facebook page of Trayvon Martin holding on to a gun, pots of pot in front of him. This wasn't a good little kid. And my
How do you know
question
what he was
is,
like? How do you know? I mean, you're saying that everyone in America that has ever taken cannabis or ever been pictured with a gun is a thug. Is that your conclusion?
Before they took his information off of his Facebook page, it was out there for everybody to see.
Where was the
And then
evidence that
why
he
did
was
they
a
try to
dangerous
keep it-
thug?
I'm sorry?
Where was the evidence that he was a dangerous thug?
He was not. He had been in trouble before. He was not some little innocent kid
So you
tiptoeing
keep
through the
saying,
tulips. And that's the point.
Let me get
And
a Raymond
also-
Santana. Let me get a Raymond Santana, because I find that quite offensive, what I've just been listening to, because there's no hard evidence that Trayvon Martin was a thug in the way that he's saying. Nothing that I've seen would suggest that. You went through an appalling episode in your life. You know, you were called an urban terrorist, a rapist. You were stigmatized, one of the most reviled people in New York City, and eventually had your name cleared along with the other members of the Central Park Five. What do you think about all this?
You know, I think that Trayvon Martin at the end of the day was a 16-year-old kid. You know, when they talk about the weed smoking and they talk about, his
17.
Facebook page, regardless, he was 16. He was a kid, regardless. And
He was 17.
And when you talk about those images, that's used against juveniles to paint a picture as they're uncontrollable, that they're up to no good. You know, that's what the same thing they did to us. There were 400 articles written on us within the first 2 weeks of this case. And it was all about dissecting our lives, trying to paint this picture that we were animals, which led people to believe that, they could turn their backs on us and whatever happened to us was okay. And that's why we wound up getting convicted. And the same thing happened in this case with Trayvon Martin. The jury had no relationship to, they couldn't relate to Trayvon Martin. Zimmerman, he stalked Trayvon Martin. He was considered community security. Community security, where was the training that he went through to carry this gun? Did he have on a uniform that indicated that he was some type of authority figure? Trayvon, in the phone call, called him a cracker because he didn't know who he was. Right. All he knew was that this man was following him. And so he did the only thing that any other brown or black kid would do, and that's run.
This guy's not being honest.
Wait a moment.
No, you're not being honest.
Yeah, wait a moment. Let's take a short...
recently-
Wait a minute, Reverend Peter. We're going to take a short break. Come back after the break, and we'll continue this debate.
Okay. For this guy to be a Reverend one, as a minister of the gospel, I am floored. I am totally outdone. But I'm gonna try to do this very quickly as possible for the sake of time. Reverend Peterson is over an organization called BOND, which stands for Brotherhood of the New Destiny. That's something, but his name is Reverend Jesse Peterson. And if you look him up on YouTube, you see he's very controversial, but the things he was saying last night was very insensitive. And as standing in a position for a man of God, I am totally thrown off. Actually, I had to go pray because I was completely outdone. His concept and notion of one of the things he was saying was race hustlers. I never heard that term before, and it's very clear what this case was about and how everything transpired. His inability to accurately or clearly answer the questions Piers Morgan was placing before him floored me even more. Let's keep going. Let's keep going because I can feel myself going there. He was talking about how this case was basically about overturning stand your ground law and gun control law, and how Barack Obama and Jesse Jackson and these other leaders were trying to use this situation to gain power and wealth by scaring white Americans. The guy is speaking as if he was there himself, as if he knew Trayvon Martin by calling him a thug because of what was posted on Facebook. That's profiling within itself. I believe the inability to relate, as the gentleman was talking about, uh, creates such a barrier that we prejudge. And as ministers, as people in general, we can't afford to do that, because once we do that, we lose sight of humanity within itself. This is a big letdown, a tremendously big letdown from someone that holds the title of reverend. Our job is to build people up, not tear them down, to give them a way out, to show them that Christ loves them, that that God forgives, not to take a horrific situation an unjust situation and spin it and regurgitate it and talk about it so cold heartedly. What is a thug? What what have we come to within our own self to understand what a thug is? I understand the variables of the teenage life now, and it's very different than that of those who may have grown up in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, even the 80s. But does that mean we are to turn our back on them? Who is to save this generation? Who is to give them hope or see hope in them? Just because they may dress in a hoodie, wear a fitted, and have saggy pants, that doesn't mean they deserve to be shot, killed innocently. We're failing. We're truly failing. And if this Reverend Peterson, this Peterson guy, I don't even. This is why people look at the church the way that they do. He's a prime example of it. I understand we have the right to say what we need to say or speak however we want to say it, but we have to be conscious of that, especially when we're representing the cross. This is just my perspective. What's yours?